G'day groovers, rockers and in between. This is Vinyl Vibes. I'm your host, Jack Hodgins. Today we are talking with guitarist of Newcastle's very own Velvet Underground, Les Hall. This is the third instalment in our Vinyl Vibes Newcastle series. Les grew up in Maitland, joining his first band, the Cavemen, when he was still in high school. After playing in his second Maitland band, the Influence of Cessal Roads, in 1968 Les would join Newcastle band, the Velvet Underground. The Velvet Underground would go on to be very popular around Newcastle in the late 60s, playing venues such as the Bus Stop Disco. The band would go on to record one single in 1970, and in the same year would be joined by future AC/DC member Malcolm Young on guitar. In 1972, the Velvet Underground would split, with Les joining Ted Mulry Gang and Malcolm Young going on to form AC/DC. In this episode, Les talks about how this Newcastle band, the Velvet Underground, went on to be the predecessor to these two massive Aussie bands of the 70s. G'day Les, and welcome to Vinyl Vibes.
Thank you, Jack.
I know last time we talked a lot about Ted Mulry Gang, but I wanted to really focus on your time in the Newcastle band Velvet Underground this time. So last time we talked, you mentioned before the Velvet Underground you were in a band, and I wanted to get the name right. Was it called the Influence of Cessal Roads? Am I right on that?
That's exactly what it was, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a Maitland band, and look, it was great fun. I've often thought to myself, why did you leave the Influence of Cessal Roads to go to Velvet Underground? And I think it was because it was the opportunity to go from a Maitland band to a Newcastle band. You know, it was that step up kind of thing. And the fact that somebody from a Newcastle band actually wanted me, that made it even better.
I'm kind of thinking too, I mean, what kind of music were you playing in the Influence of Cessal Roads?
We were doing a lot of the same stuff that Velvet was doing at the time. Tin Soldier and Small Faces.
Yeah.
And a lot of that sort of era stuff, mainly with a rocky sort of back. It was all basically rock stuff, but it was 60s version of rock stuff.
And that was your first group ever? Like, were you in anything like in school or anything like that?
Before that, I was a late bloomer. I actually had to learn piano, but I took up guitar when I was about 18. Dad actually, he paid for the piano lessons, refused to give me guitar lessons because I pulled out a piano, so I had to teach myself. But I learnt from photos of the Beatles. I just watched where their fingers were on the fretboard, and I knew from piano how to tune the guitar, so that's where it all came from. And the first band I was in was called the Cavemen, and that was with an old mate, Greg Lord. We started off without real instruments. We had plastic cutouts of guitars with fishing line for strings and that sort of business, you know.
Yeah.
So we'd mime to Beatles songs. Everything goes back to the Beatles, of course.
Did you do any gigs in the Cavemen? I mean,
No.
It would have been pretty hard.
Yeah, towards the end, once we actually started playing, we did a couple, but only a few. And then that band just wasn't happening. And of course, keeping band members in those days was nigh on impossible because, you only had to be offered anything, anywhere, and off they'd go. So when I got the chance to join the Influence of Cessal Roads, I took that and really enjoyed it. They were all great guys. In fact, a couple of them guys in Influence ended up in Velvet Underground.
Do you remember who was in the Influence of Cessal Roads?
Ian McKinney, Bruce Jeffries, Pete Sheehan on drums, Steve Crothers on bass, and Tony Heads on keyboards.
Yeah, I mean, because that brings us to Velvet Underground. I remember last time we spoke that it was, so Herm was the drummer in Velvet Underground, if I'm correct on that, at the time. Yep. And he wanted you to join because you had a Vox A330.
AC30, yeah.
AC30.
And a Gretsch Chet Atkins Country Gentleman. Yeah.
Yep.
Now, I have to correct that now. I always believed, right up until last week, that was the reason that they asked me to join the band, purely because of the gear. And it just happened that last Friday I was talking to Herm, and out of the blue I said, oh, by the way, the only reason you asked me to join Velvet Underground was because of the gear I had, wasn't it? He said, no, you played records exactly like the records. And that's why when we wanted you in the band. I thought, that's good. It was my ability, not my gear. Suddenly I felt almost good.
It got me kind of thinking too, because I had a look at the Gretsch Chet Atkins Country Gentlemen's, and because those were hollow body guitars, am I right?
It was a semi-acoustic, and at the time I bought it, it was $775. And these days, that equates to about $20,000. So it was a really big purchase, which is why my father made me trade my other guitar in. His famous words were, you can't play two guitars at once, Les. You only need one. I had to trade the other one in. And ironically, I think that guitar that I traded in was purchased by the guy that I replaced in Velvet Underground.
Wow.
Russell had to move because of his job with the Postmaster General, what we call Telecom these days, and or Australia Post. And I'm pretty sure because he had a Maitland DC 1500, and there weren't many floating around, so I'm sure it was the same guitar.
Yeah.
I've tried to contact him to find out. I haven't been able to.
And I could imagine too that there wouldn't have been many hollow body guitars in Newcastle in 1968.
Very few. As a matter of fact, one of the only other ones I ran into was in my first couple of weeks in Velvet Underground. There was a guy from, it was a Newcastle band, Nord's Wharf, was it? He came in and he had a Gibson ES335. It was a cherry-coloured one. And he said, try this, and he handed me the guitar. I've got this habit of always checking to see if a guitar's tuned before I attempt to play anything. And when I strummed it, I realised it was tuned to a chord. It was open tuned to E. That actually had a profound effect on me. After many, many years, I got a guitar, a separate guitar, tuned it to open E, and a lot of the later TMG stuff was written on open E. But that it was just a pure coincidence that the guy came in and gave me that guitar to try out.
Your first gig with the Velvet Underground, does that memory stay with you?
To be honest, no. The first one doesn't, and the reason for that is because of my nerves. I get very nervous before I go on stage. I always used to practice. I used to practice like crazy when I was young. But all of the band did not do that, I might add.
Oh, okay.
That was not necessarily a universal thing, especially in Velvet Underground.
In saying that you don't remember the first one, I mean, is there any early gigs that...
Oh, yeah, there's some of the early ones I do remember. Belmont North Community Hall, we did quite a few out there, and there was always a great gig. Bus Stop, which was Ted Landis owned Bus Stop. I think he had another one, Mousetrap or something. He booked us for quite a few gigs as well. And I remember that place because it had a weird stage. It had different platforms at different heights.
Yeah.
So it was really weird to play on. And you had to be careful when you were moving forward or moving backwards just in case you fell off your platform or whatever. There were lots of gigs that I do remember, and I think one that has always stood out to me, and I've never understood why. Oh yeah, I do know. I know why, but it's for a bizarre reason. It was a wool shed up in the valley. I think it was at the back of Singleton somewhere, and there was this gig in the wool shed, but the acoustics in it were fantastic. That was the best my guitar had ever sounded.
Yeah.
And I was just blown out by the sound. And that's why I remember that gig. Not because, there were people there and the band played well and all the rest of it, but the guitar sound, it was really good. It was one of those few days where I thought to myself, wow, this really does sound like a Gretsch tonight, But apart from that, it becomes a bit of a sausage mill grind, it's just one after the other, and they kind of blur into one another. And it was only later on that there were some very different gigs that I remember for very different reasons.
And I remember last time you mentioned, when we spoke, you mentioned that you described Newcastle as the big smoke compared to Maitland. That kind of got me thinking, like, how is Newcastle different, like, musically to Maitland, like the music scene kind of thing back then? Yeah.
It wasn't so much that it had one, because Maitland had a lot of bands in music as well. There seemed to be a little bit more, I suppose, camaraderie would be the word, in Newcastle. Everyone was out for themselves. We're all, trying to be the number one band and all that sort of stuff. When you ran into other bands, you talked to one another, and there was kind of that camaraderie, networky thing happened. And there were certain venues that you'd often meet up in. There was Tyrrell's Record Bar, for example, which used to be in town. And Bruce Saunders, who ran Tyrrell's, got all the gigs for Velvet Underground, and we'd often be in there looking at records, and you'd see guys from other bands in there. And just along from there was a cafe that we used to go into, and because as I'm sure you know, most bands live on hamburgers, and you'd often meet other bands in there. So there was that camaraderie thing that happened in Newcastle, that probably because you had the focal points for it to happen, but it didn't happen so much in Maitland at that time.
You've mentioned a few of the venues you were playing back then, and that kind of got me thinking, like, are any of them still standing, like even just the buildings themselves, like that you guys played at?
I think Belmont North Community Centre is still there. I don't know that it's still got the same name. Bus Stop is not there, and most of those old venues have gone. But the same applies to Sydney, because Velvet did play in Sydney a fair bit later on. And a lot of the venues there have gone, and some of them are still there. Ryde Community Hall, I remember playing in, which was part of the big town hall complex in Ryde. Well, it's no longer a community hall, but it's still there. Well, it no longer has gigs anyway. So, yeah, most of the places are around, as you would expect, in the late 60s, early 70s, time marches on.
Did some research into like what you guys are playing, and so you guys are playing stuff by the likes of Hendrix, Steppenwolf, the Small Faces, the Stones, and the Doors. Am I right in that?
Yeah, absolutely correct. Your research, as usual, is fantastic.
I'm glad to hear it, Les.
And don't edit that out.
Well, I can't now. Yeah, I mean, like, how did you guys go about covering those songs? Like, because did you guys? I mean, you mentioned that you like that Herm loved that you could play that like just like the records. I mean, did you keep to the records? Did you kind of do your own kind of thing? Like, how'd you go about it back then?
Well, what you do is firstly you get the record, we'd listen to it, and then I'd work out my parts. I'd often help the keyboard player. He wasn't quite as quick as me at working things out, and I'd help him with some of the parts as well, because I had played keyboards or piano, so I had a bit of knowledge with the keyboard. So we'd sort the parts out. And Mark had an incredible memory. Mark Priest, these days, well, last I heard he was running things in pubs, trivia nights.
Oh, yeah.
And I could imagine him doing that because his memory was fantastic. And every note that we worked out, he would play it identically every time. The bass player, kind of a different story with Scoey. He broke his bottom E string, and I don't think he ever replaced it.
Wow.
His famous phrase was, well, I don't use it anyway. So that was him. And the other guys in the band were Steve Phillipson was the singer, who I never appreciated just what a great frontman he was, and I'll get back to that in a moment. And Herm, of course, was the drummer, and he'd come from a band called The Web, OUEBBE, and how schoolboy wit is that one? So that was the band at the time when I joined, when I was 20. Yeah. And you're right, those songs you mentioned, they're all the ones we did, and we did reasonable versions of them.
I mean, you mentioned Steve Phillipson there, and he was a great frontman. I mean, and I know that when you guys played Fire by Jimi Hendrix, and you mentioned this last time, he used to set himself on fire.
That's right.
Yeah.
He had lighter fluid. He had a red jacket that he'd wear, and he poured the lighter fluid on the jacket, and then he'd light it on fire. And, he'd be dancing around and blah, blah, blah. He had to be very careful how much lighter fluid he put on.
I could imagine.
Because if he put too much on, it would soak through and start burning his skin. But it's funny, like bands, I don't know how to describe this. I guess it doesn't happen a great deal in many workplaces, but bands rarely will say, oh, that sounds great, you did a really good job. We never tend to praise. If somebody makes a mistake in a song, that's the first thing you're going to discuss when you get off stage. Oh, you really stuffed up, blah, 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 you know, that sort of thing. But nobody ever complimented anyone on what they did. And it was only comparatively recent that Herm was talking to John Paul Young, a name which I'm sure your listeners will be familiar with. Yeah. And although he was John Young when we met him. And John actually said to him, Steve Phillipson and Stevie Wright from the Easy Beats were the two best frontmen in Australia in that era. And he was probably right, but I'd never realised it because I was just standing behind him playing guitar and not really paying attention to him.
Is Steve still out there doing stuff? No.
Steve passed away a while ago about 20 years ago. As we move through the chronological order of Velvet Underground, which I'm sure you're going to do, he ended up... Well, he went through his phases. Do you remember a band called Jethro Tull?
Absolutely.
Right. Well, the lead singer for Jethro Tull had the habit of standing on one leg and propping the other leg up on his first leg and holding onto the microphone, and wearing a long jacket. It was a bizarre look when you think of it now, but it became very kitsch at the time, And Steve saw it and thought, oh, yeah, that's me. So he started doing that. Bad mistake, you know. And then he started reciting poetry in between songs.
Okay.
Bad mistake number 2. So we eventually had a talk with him, said, come on, mate, what's going on here? We couldn't talk him out of it, so eventually he was replaced.
I know you guys did Fire by Jimi Hendrix, and I know the artists that you were kind of covering, but I wanted to kind of know, like, in those early stages, what were the specific songs by those artists you were kind of playing?
Oh, well, with Jimi Hendrix, there was one called Fire.
Yes.
Hey Joe, and there was another one.
Purple Haze.
Yeah.
I was right.
Sorry,
yeah.
thank you. I was remembering the riff, but I can't remember the lyric. So they were the songs by them. With Doors, it was mainly Light My Fire. A lot of Fire songs happening here.
Yeah.
Light My Fire, I think that was the main one we did. We may have done one or two other Doors songs, but that was the big hit. Small Faces, it was Tin Soldier. And I think we may have done Ichiku Park at one stage as well. What was another band?
The Who.
Steppenwolf. Let's go Steppenwolf first.
Yep.
Loved Steppenwolf for a couple of reasons. They're a really great rock band, and Magic Carpet Ride was their big hit back in the day. So we did our version of that. And they also had Born to be Wild. I think at one stage we did that. But they were the two main songs by Steppenwolf. With The Who, it was My Generation. Won't Get Fooled Again. We might have done it at some stage.
Yeah.
But that was it for The Who. Any others?
I haven't got any others down.
Right, that'll do.
Yeah, okay.
Moving right along.
Yeah, and you mentioned last time that you were working at David Jones. I was just wondering if you're doing that still during Velvet Underground.
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I would get off the train on the days that we were practicing. I would get off at Hamilton Station on the way back to Maitland. I'd go to the fish and chip shop, or hamburger shop it was, on the main road, get some chips and a hamburger, try and eat the burger before I got back to the flat. If I made the mistake of putting the chips down with my bottle of Coke, all of which I might add would cost the princely sum of about 2 shillings in those days. If I made the mistake of going to the toilet, by the time I got back, the vultures, and that's the kindest word I can think of for the rest of the members of the band, would be out and the chips would be gone.
Oh, no.
And that was a regular habit. Because there was only myself and the bass player, Dave Schofield, I think, that worked. The other guys were all, for lack of a better phrase, we'll call them professional musicians. And they also didn't get out of bed till God knows when. I mean, I'd be coming home from work. I'd finish work at 5. The train would get me into Hamilton about 20 past 5. And I'd be lucky if Herman and some of the others were out of bed at the time. Most times after rehearsal, I would stay the night. No, I'd go home. It was only after the band played I'd stay the night because it was too much of a hassle trying to get up in the morning with all the noise that was happening in that place. Yeah. It was above a Chinese restaurant.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Really interesting environment.
So you guys relocated to King's Cross in Sydney and you got a residency at Down Under Disco in King's Cross. Am I right on that?
You're right.
Yeah, what was the Down Under Disco like?
Okay. I'm going to word this very carefully, but I think you'll get the drift. We'd always get down there early. There were 2 shifts that happened at Down Under when we first got it. There was another band at the time, which was the up-and-coming Sherbet, who had the day gig, and we had the night shift. And we'd often get in early and we'd have a Coke. None of us were drinkers to any extent in those days. I remember one night there was this really attractive lady came in, a young girl, and she sat down and of course the band were hovering around her like moths to a flame. It was really quite embarrassing. Later on, the guy who owned the place sort of came up and said, I should warn you, she is not exactly what you think. And one of the guys said, she's a prostitute or something? And he said, no, she is a he. And we were from Maitland and Newcastle, you know, and we just weren't familiar with what was going on in the really big smoke. And the person's name was Paul. And spoke to Paul a few times, you know, and just accepted Paul as Paul and you know, And he would often say, "Oh, I've got so and so coming tonight," who would be one of his girlfriends, and a nice young lady who he would introduce to the band. So we got to know Paul quite well, and he didn't become our pimp or anything like that, but he did introduce us to a lot of young ladies. The big thing I remember about that place, though, was the fact that you had so many Americans in there. They were out here on R&R, Rest and Recreation, after Vietnam, and or in the middle of Vietnam.
Yeah.
And it was somewhat depressing when you hear these guys say, "I can't wait to get back to the world." You know, I didn't realise, because I naively imagined that America would be much like Australia. And it wasn't until the early 70s that actually made it over there and and realised exactly what they were talking about. It was definitely 10, maybe 20 years ahead of us at that stage.
Yeah.
But it was still a little bit insulting to hear it. But they were really nice people. Yeah. They were here to relax. The herbal activities that went on, if you get my drift, were rather frightful. But and I can tell you, absolutely, the band was the straightest band in the world at that point in time. No alcohol, no anything, just water and Coke. We lived on Coke for the caffeine.
Gets me thinking too. I mean, you kind of mentioned, you described like Sydney, King's Cross as the big smoke. I mean, as someone that was, like I think you were 20 at this stage, 21 maybe. I mean, were you learning like lots about life during that time? Like I don't know, like a lot
define life lessons, young Jack. Come on, young Jack. Describe life lessons to me.
I know
this will get him, guys. He's going to get.
I think
he's going red. I've got him.
He's got me. It's life lessons. Well,
no, I'll make life easy for you. It was a completely different lifestyle. The pace was the thing you noticed. Everything was at a much faster pace. Maitland is not how it was when I was a kid. It was very slow when I was a kid. I've seen a photo of the street that I still live in Maitland, and it's an aerial shot, and you're looking down, and all the roads that come up in that photo, there are 2 cars.
Yeah.
And that was taken in the mid-50s from what I remember. So, it was very different. The pace in Sydney was... If you're going to learn to drive anywhere, Sydney was a perfect place to learn to... Everybody drove like a taxi driver. They were all frenetic, and that was a big difference. The availability of just about everything was another thing. If you wanted to buy a particular guitar, there were plenty of guitar shops, and most of them in those days would give you some form of credit too. It was a really different world. So it made life easier. And then when it came to what you were wearing on stage, it was a lot easier to get the kind of gear that you wanted in Sydney than it was in Newcastle.
I know the Velvet Underground recorded one single. There we go.
Yeah.
Tell you what, A-side, Somebody to Love, B-side, She Comes in Colours, and I don't think we got on to, how did you guys come to record that? Like, because Festival Records did it. I mean, did they get you to record it, or did you just go in and record it? Yeah.
Look, we went in and recorded it. It was the agent at the time who lined it all up for us, and I'm not sure. I suspect that was Dal Miles. But we used to do the songs on stage anyway, and somebody said, "Oh, you do that really well. You should do a recording of it." And the agent apparently agreed, lined up the recording session, and we did them. It came out in festival, did absolutely nothing. But there's, I've heard a copy of it too, and it's rather loose when you hear it these days. But that's how things were. It was, as time went on, the band tightened up.
I was listening closely to the A-side, Somebody to Love, and you got this great guitar at the beginning, like that effect at the beginning. Like, I don't know whether it's feedback or what it is, but
it was feedback.
Yeah, how'd you guys get that? Like, was it just?
You get your guitar, walk over to your amp, turn your amp up, turn your guitar up, and it just starts going and going berserk. It's it's a resonance that starts happening that causes the feedback, and the room you're in makes a big difference as well. But that was how we started that particular song.
Because you played lead on that recording, am I right on that?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Because I was listening closely, and you got like this crazy guitar like tone like on it. It's like a psychedelic kind of thing going on. I mean, how'd you get that tone back then?
That was all. I think that might have been Spencer Lee that recorded that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, there's a hippie for you. And so he was getting the tone that was happening at the time and was probably using some sort of phasing or something of it. To be honest, I rarely listen to any of the stuff that we record, and it's been far too long since no, not long enough since I last heard that one. But yeah, it was just a product of its time, you know.
Yeah, I listened to the B side as well, and because that was originally by Love, and I was kind of thinking, like, because you guys played acoustic on that, because you played the acoustic on that.
You know, I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah, you've got me with that one. I imagine it would have had to been me because I was the only guitarist.
So probably.
It probably was. But don't ask me whose acoustic or what acoustic it was because I could not tell you.
Yeah, okay, because the reason why I ask is because I had to listen to Love's original version, and they have like an electric guitar instead of like an acoustic guitar on there, and I kind of was thinking like, what inspired you guys to do an acoustic instead of an electric on that song? Because you had electrics, I mean, yeah.
Probably just a point of difference.
Yeah,
that'd be it.
And I mean, in saying that too, I mean, did you guys record that 45 in one session?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Time was money. Studios it wasn't as bad as it became later on, but the studios were still expensive. And we got in and recorded the thing. Pardon me. I don't think we were even in there for the mix. I think we just recorded it and went home. Spencer, I think, mixed it, and then we came in and had a listen to it. But it was just too bad if we didn't like it. It was already done.
Because you guys I think this was your first time ever in a studio, and you didn't have as much experience in the studio back then, obviously, because it's your first time, and you kind of just did what Spencer kind of told you guys to do, and that kind of got me thinking, like, if you knew then what you know now about recording and about being in the studio, I mean, would you have done anything different on that 45, do you think?
Well, where do I start? Well, the first thing I'd done is shown Spencer the door and kicked him out, and... lots of things differently. The way we recorded the guitar, probably the way we recorded the track, because you basically, look, I think that was recorded on, it might have been a 6 or an 8 track at the probably not, a 6 more likely. So, you know, you didn't have many tracks. There was no bouncing or anything like that. It was very minimalist. Yeah, these days you could do it completely... You could do it really well on Pro Tools and which is how we do all the recording these days.
Yeah. How has that change been for you? I mean, it's like, do you prefer doing Pro Tools than working with those old tape machines? Or
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the old tape did have a warmth about it, and I'll give it that. But I mean, if you get one of your old tapes these days, especially when you're 2-inch. These days, as something was recorded back then, you've got to bake it. Yeah, and you've got to actually go through a process before you can play it to make sure that the coating doesn't shed as you're playing the damn thing. And once you're playing it, well, I think it's only good for a couple more plays and that's it. So you transfer it to digital straight away. Digital, it's getting better all the time. It sounds really good. And if you want to warm it up and make it sound like the old analog days, then you just play it back through the heads of a 2-track, record it off that, and you've got it.
And I think it was soon after you recorded that 45 that a Velvet Underground gig in Toowoomba, Queensland, I think it was the headliner was Stevie Wright, and he says to you, and this is the quote, "You'd be heaps better with another guitarist." And he suggested George Young's brother, Malcolm Young. Am I right in that?
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I believe it was Toowoomba. We did a lot of the Royal Easter shows as Velvet Underground. That version of Velvet Underground just had Herman Kovacs, myself, Steve Phillipson, I think was still the singer, but Stephen Crothers from Influence was now the bass player, and Tony Heads. No, Tony wasn't in by then. He was out of the band. And I'm not even sure that Steve Phillipson was still in it. But we backed quite a few artists, Laurel Lee, Tony Worsley, and Stevie Wright, and the Sheik from Scrubby Creek. What was his name? Anyway, look up Sheik from Scrubby Creek and you'll have his name. And we backed those all the way through the show, and Stevie we particularly enjoyed. I think we were doing Wedding Ring, and we were doing Friday on My Mind. There were a couple of his songs we did. And he did say, we told him we were after another guitarist. He said, well, why don't you go try George's brother? He's sitting at home doing nothing. He plays guitar. So we went round to Burwood, knocked on the door, and now you've got more questions for me, I'm sure.
I have all I know where the story is going, because I think it was Angus Young who answered the door. Am I right in that?
It was,
yeah.
Yep. Angus opened the door and then went back into his room, and we went out. He got Malcolm. We went out and we sat down, had a cup of tea with Mel, and I think his sister was still there at the time too. And we just said, are you interested in playing in the band? And I don't know if I told you last time, but just in case I have, forget it or edit it out or whatever. As we were walking out, heard the noise coming from the bedroom and walked in, and there was a big old wardrobe with those big old masonite doors. Malcolm slid one of the doors open and said, that's just Angus. And he was in there playing with, he had an SG. He was playing along to Led Zeppelin on this little record player. And after Mal said, that's just Angus, he slammed the door shut. And we went to walk out, and their father walked into the room. And Malcolm said, these are the guys from Velvet Underground and blah, blah, and we shook hands. And his father pointed to the wardrobe and said, he's the one. And then, I think I've mentioned to you, I thought he was nuts. He had George, who'd written Friday on My Mind and been so successful. And then there was another one of the guys too that was in another English band. And yet he was pointing to this unknown commodity in the wardrobe saying he's the one. Just as a father, I have learned. Yes, we do get to know our children, and we know them very well. And he knew his children very, very well.
When Malcolm, because Malcolm, you joined the band. I mean, how was that first jam with him? Because I think you guys invited him to jam at Monovale, is it?
Monovale, yeah. It was great. It was really good, and it was rather enlightening because he was actually a much better lead player than anybody imagined. And we tried a couple of songs, and he knew the lead on one song. And I said, look, and I know Herm has written a book, and I know this is in the book, so it's you can verify it that way. I said to him, if you want to play some lead, we'll share that. That'd be great. He went, oh, good. So that's what we did. So he came over, and we were rehearsing in the garage over there. One occasion he came over, he was using a Fisonic amplifier at the time. I had a Marshall. I said, do you want to try the Marshall? He said, no, that's right. I got, okay. Well, you're welcome to try it if you like. No, it's all right. That's one of Mel's qualities. Nobody was ever going to force Malcolm into anything. He would make up his own mind to do it, and once he made his mind up, that was it. And you can tell that came in very, very handy as time went on with him. Yeah. But on one particular occasion, we went inside having a cup of tea. Malcolm was still out in the shed. He plugged into the Marshall. He started using it, and the rest, as they say, is history. Yeah. He bought one the following week, and that particular model was the one he used right up until he stopped playing. So, good old Mal.
Good old Mal, yeah. I mean, and because I was reading too, I mean, by this time, the band's set lists, I think, had changed to more contemporary 70s songs at that time. What were contemporary 70s songs like All Right Now by Free, I Hear You Knocking by Dave Edmunds. Yeah, what inspired that kind of move, just trying to be contemporary at the time? Yeah.
Well, it was a matter of we were doing covers. We weren't playing any original stuff. So the covers we wanted to play were the things that we thought people would want to hear. T-Rex. And we did Won't Get Fooled Again by The Who, and in that Malcolm was doing that ding 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 picking sort of thing, which later appeared on one of the AC/DC songs. I'll let you guys research that. And we did Telegram Sam, and if you listen to Telegram Sam, obliterate the vocal and the melody and just listen to the music, you could quite easily imagine AC/DC playing that. But Bon would put an entirely different melody and entirely different lyrics on it. But like all of us, you play different stuff, you assimilate the certain styles into your own style, and it becomes an interpretation of everything that you've learned. And that was what Mal was doing, and eventually it all paid off for him.
It certainly did. No, it certainly did. And I mean, that gets me thinking too. I mean, we talked about the first jam, but I know that the first gig, I think, was April 1971, and it was, I think it was at a place called the Ravioli, if I got this right. And I was just kind of thinking, like, do you remember that gig with Mal, that first gig with Malcolm? Yeah.
I do, because it was great. It was really good to have a guitar in. We had been 3-piece. Now we were 4-piece. Well, we were actually 5-piece. I think Andy Imler by this time had become the singer. We went through a few singers. I should mention this one. When we were after singers, we auditioned a couple. There were a few guys, some who were no longer, or quite a few who were no longer with us. And one of them was this very tall guy with very dark eyes. He had a great voice, but he was over 6 foot tall. So we decided that he wasn't really a good fit for our band at the time. John English, his name was, and he later did quite well on his own, so he didn't need us. As time went on, we met quite a few people that later on reappeared in our lives. And John, the late John English, lovely guy, was one of them.
One of the songs that you guys had on your set list around this time was My Sweet Lord by George Harrison, and I was kind of surprised to read that because it's not really a rocky song. I mean, it's like a laid back kind of thing. I mean, did you stay close to the original? Did you rock it up a bit? I mean, how'd you guys go about that?
We didn't use an acoustic. We used electrics, but we did stay close to the original. And the reason we did it was because it was number one. So, and Herman was a fanatic, a Beatles fanatic, still is, and has never lived down the fact that I am the only person, probably from Maitland, who actually saw the Beatles live. Yeah. So, in fact, I gave Herm my ticket to that show about 10 years ago. It was a mistake. I saw one going for $300 on eBay a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, so we were Beatle fanatics. That was the start of our musical journey. And so My Sweet Lord, even though we knew it was He's So Fine, and it was remarkably similar to the song that George accidentally copied, but it was a huge hit, so we had to do it.
I've read too, I mean, you're talking about Angus Young earlier, and because I've read that he came to some of the gigs to watch Mal and watch you guys. Do you remember anything of like that?
Standing up in the back of the hall, yeah. He did, because he wasn't allowed out because of his age, and Margaret, their older sister, liked Herman, and Herm went to Maitland Morris Brothers, which was a Catholic school. And so Margaret, God love her, thought that Herm would be a responsible person to have, and she was actually right. He was quite responsible. So he was able to come to the gig, but he had to be with Uncle Herman. And that's how Angus got to go to the gigs. But the age difference between them, I think Malcolm was something like, look, I'm guessing maybe 3 or 4 years. But when you're that old, when like Mel was his early 20s, well, we were all in our early 20s, 3 or 4 years is an eternity, It's a long time. Yeah. So, we had to be mindful of that when he came to the gigs, and he went home with Mel, so he was looked after.
Later on you wrote heaps of stuff with Ted Mulry, and I mean, were you writing songs at this time at all? Like, were you tinkering around, writing little riffs here and there?
Just starting. I'm one of those people that I write from music. I have to have the music first, and then the melody comes second and the lyrics third. I think I mentioned that to you before. Yep. MML. Can't remember the Roman equivalent in numbers. But, that's the way I always wrote. But in those days, I was still searching for how I was going to do it. And I think what helped me a lot was when we got together with Ted, because he was already very accomplished at that.
Before you guys started playing with Ted, or maybe it was at around the same time, I'm not sure, but you can, of course, correct me on this. I mean, because I didn't realise this, the Velvet Underground changed their name to Pony for about 6 months. Is that, yeah?
I believe so. I've conveniently forgotten that period.
Was that was that before Ted, or like?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I don't know why. It was just one of those acts of stupidity the bands do. Towards the end of Velvet, we had... the band just sort of wasn't... It was stagnating.
Yeah.
And we all sensed it. And I was going off with Ted as his MD, only because he was too lazy to tune the guitars and rehearse with guys. So that was my job. Boy, was that tedious with some bands. So I was doing that a bit, and there weren't that many gigs coming in for Velvet Underground or Pony in those days. So I think it was a mutual decision to self-destruct. Mal went off and, as we know, started AC/DC.
Yeah.
Andy, I believe, was in another band for a little while, and one of the guys that was in the band with Andy, which was called Elm Tree, was John Paul Young, and I think I mentioned to you in the past how he got his break. So we just sort of went our separate ways. It was Herman, I'm pretty sure, who said to Ted, "Why don't we form a band so you don't have to blah, blah, blah?" And that's why we did. So Mal went off, and I think Dave Evans became the first singer for AC/DC. Dave had been the singer for Velvet Underground for a short period towards the end as well. And so he knew him. But when Mal went off, at first, if you have a look at some of the early photos, they're still in glam stuff. Before AC/DC hit its stride, shall we say.
I mean, of course, after that, the rest is history. You guys go off and do Ted Mulry Gang. They go off and do AC/DC eventually. And, just as the final kind of question, what did you think of AC/DC when you kind of heard them for the first time?
I thought they were fantastic, and I still think they're fantastic. They were great. They are great, and we still stayed in contact. A couple of times when they came back to Australia, we'd get a message. We weren't with Alberts anymore. We'd gone with Mushroom, and then after that, I think we didn't go through anybody after the couple of albums with Mushroom. But Alberts would contact us from time to time and say, "Look, AC/DC are in town. Malcolm asked if you'd like to come along and see the gig." So we did.
I have to thank you for your time today, Les. I think we've covered some really good things.
Not a problem, mate.
That was Les Hall, guitarist of Newcastle's very own Velvet Underground. To check out Les's recent music with Ted Mulry Gang, head to the band's website at tedmulrygang.com. Tune in a fortnight for the fourth instalment in our Newcastle Vinyl Vibes series when I talk with Les Gully, drummer of Armageddon. Remember to share this show with other music fans. And if you really like what you heard today, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Vinyl Vibes. And to all you music lovers out there, stay groovy.